Please.
In just a few seconds, a Russian radar station once considered the divine eye of air defense was reduced to rubble by a sudden Ukrainian UAV strike. No warning, no advance notice. What really happened behind the explosion that paralyzed the entire system? On the 27th of July, a Ukrainian drone carried out a bold reconnaissance strike on a Russian military radar station in Bryansk, just over 100 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. This wasn't just a precise hit, it was a strategic, preemptive strike that pierced through Russia's dense air defense network. The radar station, once seen as the divine eye guarding the skies, was disabled, creating a dangerous gap in the early warning system. Ukraine didn't just strike a target, it struck at the very core of Russia's military confidence. In the early hours of the 28th of July, just hours after the strike on Bryansk, waves of Ukrainian drones crossed the border and appeared over Kursk, Voronezh, and Oryol, shaking Russia's radar bases and rear logistics depots. What's truly astonishing is this. Drones worth only a few $1,000s easily pierced through a multi-billion-dollar air defense system, including the renowned S-300 and S-400 complexes. In just a few short minutes, target detection sensors were thrown into disarray, defense systems responded with delay, and a secondary command post was completely destroyed. Each drone wasn't just a weapon, it was a strategic drill aimed directly at the pressure points of Russia's combat coordination machinery. The stark contrast between low cost and high damage has led international analysts to label this as a textbook example of 21st century asymmetric warfare. Ukraine has proven that it doesn't need massive troops or stockpiles of bombs, just the right calculations, the right timing, and a well-placed strike can shake the foundations of a system once thought untouchable. On the 29th of July, while Russia was still reeling from the attacks on Bryansk and Kursk, a wave of Ukrainian drones suddenly appeared on the outskirts of Kaluga, less than 200 kilometers from Moscow. A long-range radar station, positioned to monitor missile activity from Western airspace, was completely disabled after a direct hit. This marked the first time since the beginning of the war that a military target deep in the heart of Russia was destroyed by a UAV. The strike immediately sent shockwaves through Russian public opinion because the once safe rear is no longer safe. People in Moscow, Smolensk, and Pskov were shaken as they realized that the sound of air raid sirens was no longer echoing from distant front lines, but right above their heads. Ukraine has officially blurred the line between front and rear, turning the idea of being far from the battlefield into a dangerous illusion. War is no longer confined by geography. From Donetsk to the heart of Moscow, every radar station, ammunition depot, or supply line is now a potential target. A new battlefield has emerged, stretching across the entire Russian homeland. After the successive strikes on Bryansk, Kursk, and Kaluga, Russia's early warning radar network began to show clear signs of fracture. Several frontline bases in Belgorod and Rostov reported temporary radar blindness, an inability to receive data from central stations that had been compromised. The coordination between the Air Force, air defense systems, and long-range missile command fell into disarray, forcing many units to revert to independent operation mode. In emergency meetings, the Russian Ministry of Defense admitted to a temporary coordination gap and rushed repair teams to the affected sites. But it was already too late. Ukraine seized that very gap to launch a series of follow-up strikes on a fuel depot in Voronezh and a logistics base in Oriol. What started with the destruction of a single radar station triggered a domino effect across the entire system, slowing down Russia's response by several crucial beats. In modern warfare, even a moment's delay can cost the initiative. And Ukraine, with each strike executed like a pre-programmed algorithm, is now forcing Russia into a strategic game it no longer fully controls. From a nation once on the defensive, Ukraine is now setting the tempo of the war through calculated, precise, and consistent strikes. They don't need to destroy everything in sight, just target the right strategic links, like radar systems, ammunition depots, and supply routes, and the enemy's entire operational chain begins to unravel. Each drone is a cold but powerful statement. We are no longer defending, we are controlling the game. And Russia, despite its massive arsenal, is now being forced to react to a series of smart, surgical blows, no longer dictating the battlefield, but chasing it. The strike on the radar station was just the beginning because shortly after, Ukrainian drones launched another surprise blow, this time targeting a Russian military train. And what happened next left the entire world stunned. At 3:47 a.m. on the 22nd of June, 2025, as a Russian train engineer was checking his schedule, he had no idea that Ukraine's eyes had been silently tracking his fuel convoy for the past 73 minutes. In just 94 more seconds, 840 tons of diesel would erupt into a fiery aerial spectacle, all orchestrated by 3 drones worth a mere $8,000. In that final moment, there were no sirens, no air defense missiles, only a chilling, surgical silence. Ukraine had chosen the perfect moment to pull the trigger. "35 kilometers away, inside an undisclosed base, Ukraine's elite Cobble 9 unit was monitoring every thermal frame from a recon drone via encrypted Starlink connection. See that bright white dot glowing in the feed? That's the diesel locomotive, a perfect target, radiating in the icy 47°C night. The DJI Mavic drones had been modified to pinpoint thermal weak spots on each fuel car with surgical precision. This wasn't a blind strike, this was battlefield surgery powered by tech, where even a single degree Celsius could mean the difference between survival and catastrophe for the entire convoy. Make no mistake, this wasn't some random ambush. For 96 hours leading up to the explosion, Ukraine had been quietly tracking this train through a network of ground intelligence and encrypted apps. They knew the exact departure time from the Rostovan fuel depot, the average speed across each sector, and most importantly, a 20-minute blind zone, a stretch where the train would be out of range of all Russian air defense systems. Not a single step was left to chance. Every calculation was a silent blade, and when the clock struck the precise second, Ukraine didn't just fire at a train car, they fired straight into a strategic gap in Russia's entire logistics system. Each car in this convoy carried 70 tons of diesel, enough to keep a Russian tank brigade operational for 3 days. With 12 cars, that's 840 tons of fuel, the equivalent of 10 days of movement for 3 frontline armored units. Ukraine didn't just destroy fuel, they choked off the logistical lifeblood that sustains war. In a conflict where every single day counts, 10 days without fuel can mean the difference between a breakthrough at the front and sitting still like expensive steel sculptures. This wasn't a strike on tanks, it was a strike on the very ability to run the entire operation. These are no longer ordinary commercial DJI Mavics. Ukraine has transformed them into tech warriors equipped with custom software, 56x digital zoom, 45-minute flight time, and most critically, a frequency-hopping transmission system that shifts 1,500 times per second. While Russia pours millions into massive jamming systems, Ukraine answers with intelligence and innovation, leaving their enemy scrambling in a video game they can no longer control. This is a war between agile technology and stagnant power, and Ukraine just won the first round.
Охуеть!
When Russia's LER-3 jamming system activated, RF waves flooded the sky like an invisible death net, covering a 30-kilometer radius. But Ukraine was ready. Instead of relying on radio signals, they used TUM light. Each attack drone was connected to its control center through an ultra-thin fiber optic cable, just 9 microns, thick, transmitting data at 1.5 gigabyte per second, without emitting a single electromagnetic signal. You can jam the sky, but you can't disrupt a strand of glass flying silently through the air. That's when Russia realized they weren't just fighting drones anymore, they were fighting physics. Can you imagine it? A compact drone carrying a 2.6 kilogram PG-7VL-shaped charge turned car number 4 into a 4,000 degrees Celsius inferno in an instant. This warhead was originally designed to punch through tank armor, but today it sliced through the thin steel shell of a fuel car like a hot knife through butter. The explosion wasn't just destruction, it vaporized the entire contents into pressure and flame, creating a fireball visible from 20 kilometers away. Be honest, how many rubles would it take Russia to produce a spectacle like that? Ukraine did it with a single, well-timed clip. But the most terrifying part wasn't the initial explosion, it was what came next, triggered by an old Soviet-era design flaw. The fuel cars were linked by a pressurized ventilation system, originally intended to balance internal gases during loading and unloading. But guess what happens when that pressure system carries vapor ignited at 4,000 degrees Celsius? Exactly, it turned the entire train into a chain of bombs. Flames from car number 4 surged backward into car number 4 stain, 3 and forward into car number 5 in just 20 seconds. You think one explosion is enough? Ukraine just turned a decades-old design oversight into the perfect weapon of destruction. Amid firestorms and scorching winds, Ukraine's drones weren't just fighting against air defenses, they were battling the sheer force of their own success. Can you even picture it? The fireball's shockwave created whirlwinds reaching up to 60 km/h, throwing flight paths off by as much as 15 meters. One drone got its fiber tether caught on a metal sign, yanked around like a kite in a hurricane. But instead of aborting, the operator flew it like a chained hawk, steering it straight into the target with a final precision strike in just 1.3 seconds. In the middle of that hellscape, who really controlled the sky? You already know the answer. With just $8,000 and a handful of modified drones, Ukraine incinerated over $2, $4 million worth of Russian military assets, 840 tons of fuel gone, and the supply lines for 3 brigades paralyzed for 3 weeks. Do the math. That's a return on investment of over 30,000%, a yield no stock market in the world can match. But this isn't just economics, it's a strategic declaration. Intelligence and technology have outpaced steel and wealth. So in this new era, what would you rather have, brute force or the ability to hit the right button at the right time? The attack on the fuel train wasn't just a tactical victory, it was a powerful testament that the era of purely mechanized warfare is over. Ukraine didn't need heavy tanks or massive bombers to shift the tide. All they needed was patience, intelligence, and a few flying machines guided by iron will. In the 21st century, victory doesn't belong to the biggest force, it belongs to those who master timing, technology, and pinpoint precision. And in that moment, Ukraine did something the whole world had no choice but to look up and recognize.